Chapter 7, William had to go and kill, basically, his dog, Gamba, which was a really difficult thing. And it was showing how bad the situation was in Malawi, that people were starting to die every single day of having no food to eat. And the diseases that come with it, and everyone looks skinny, everyone looks terrible. And it's really difficult for anyone to get any type of food. Chapter 8, 20 days. 2 weeks after I buried my dog, cholera swept our district. It's basically a sickness, an illness, a disease that is found in dirty water. And if you drink that water or you get near anything that has that disease, you become infected and it can kill you. Every year, hundreds of thousands of people die from cholera. And this is mostly in poor areas of the world, like Malawi, where William is from. Doctors said the sickness started in southern Malawi back in November. A farmer visiting a funeral brought it north, where it spread like grass fire, or it spread quick like a fire. Within days, hundreds of people were sick, and 12 had died. Cholera is a highly contagious infection that causes severe diarrhea. Now, when you have diarrhea, you lose a lot of body fluids, things that are keeping you alive. And if you're living in a place with no food, no clean water, and you're being sick and you have diarrhea, you will die very quickly, and it's horrible. People mostly get it by eating food or drinking water that's been contaminated with feces, with poop. Across Africa, it's an unfortunate companion of every rainy season. Many villages have poorly built latrines, which are like toilets and pipes that carry the poop, that flood with the rains, and they pollute the wells and streams where people drink. So people end up drinking water that's got poop going through it. Blowflies also spread the bacteria after crawling out of toilets and landing on food. The diarrhea that results is clear and milky and quickly leads to dehydration. If people aren't treated and helped immediately, they could die. During the famine, people out looking for food became the unwitting carriers. The cholera stuck them on the roads and forced them to become sick in the bush. Rain, flies, and cockroaches then spread the infection onto the banana peels, roots, and corn husks, the maize, that others picked up to eat. To get rid of the cholera, the clinic at the trading center started giving away chlorine to clean our drinking water. For months, it tasted like metal, so they put the chlorine in the water to clean it. They also advised families to cover the holes of their latrines, of their toilets, to keep out the flies. My father made a lid from a piece of iron sheeting, but as soon as it was removed, the fat green blowfly swarmed out like a plague and smashed into your head and face. It was a lot of work trying to swat them and finish your business on the toilet at the same time. In those days, any signs of diarrhea near the latrine hole caused alarm. Each morning, the cholera people walked past our house on the way to the clinic. Their eyes were cloudy and their skin was wrinkled like an old person from dehydration. I would watch them until they got close, then run down the trail towards home. But as soon as they passed, the starving people would follow. Between hunger and cholera, we had many funerals in Wimbe. A funeral is where you go when someone dies. At home, Joffrey's anemia grew worse. His legs became grotesquely, so disgustingly swollen with kwashiorkor. Remember, that's the disease where your belly looks like you're fat, but actually it's because your body has tons of fluid inside of you and you're dying. If you touched his foot, your finger left a mark in his bubbled skin, as if his foot were made of clay or like cement. You touch it and your finger looks like it stays there. Can you feel it? I asked one day, touching the blisters. Does it hurt? I can't feel anything, he said. He also became dizzy and had trouble walking in a straight line. One afternoon I was taking him outside into the sunshine, but he stopped and said, Wait, come back, I can't see. We stood there until his eyes adjusted to the light before we continued. For months his mother had only served him pumpkin leaves, and now, like Kamba, my cousin was starving to death. With little else to do, my mother took half of our flour for the day and gave it to Joffrey's mother. There's enough here for porridge, she told her. It isn't much, but I can't watch my own family suffer. We were all losing weight, especially me. The bones were now showing in my chest and shoulders, and the rope belt that I'd made for my pants no longer worked. Now I just pinched two belt loops together and tied them off with a stick, twisting more as I got thinner. My arms and legs looked like blue gum poles and ached, and they were sore and tired all of the time. I had trouble squeezing my hand into a fist. One afternoon I was pulling weeds in the field when my heart started racing so fast. I lost my breath and I nearly fainted. What's happening with me? I thought. Terrified and scared, I bent down slowly until my knees touched the dirt. Then I stayed there until my heartbeat returned to normal and I could breathe again. That same night, I sat in my room with the lantern while the hunger played games with my mind. If I sit still and don't move, the walls began to spin in slow circles, like a merry-go-round. I followed a centipede up the wall for what seemed like hours. When a mayfly, an insect, flew close to the lantern, I grabbed it by the wings and I asked it, "How are you alive? What are you eating?" One thing was for certain. No magic could save us now. Starving was a cruel kind of science. Even my father, once a giant man, shriveled like a raisin. Sharp bones now replaced brawny muscle. His teeth seemed bigger, his hair was thinner, and for once I noticed the scars on his skin. One afternoon he reported having trouble seeing across the courtyard, across the garden. The hunger was robbing his vision, just as it had Joffrey's. Everyone's getting skinnier. Everyone's bodies are changing. The trousers they don't have, they don't fit them anymore. So William and his family are all slowly dying. It seemed the thinner my father became, the more he wanted to weigh himself. He kept a mise scale hanging by a rope near the tool shed, and one morning I watched his routine. He walked out and gripped the hook, then hung there like a sack of grain, staring up at the needle. He made a grunting sound and said, 5 kilos. Mama? As always, my mother came and looked, but refused to weigh herself. The children were also forbidden, not allowed. Like many women during the hunger, she'd started tying her mpango tight around her waist like a belt. She said it confused her stomach and tricked her heart from beating so fast, helping her breathe. At night, she used mind games to help us children. "You're losing weight because you're thinking about food," she told us. "Don't you know that causes your body to stress and burn more energy?" My sisters cried. Aisha said, "But Mama, I don't want to become swollen." Swollen is when your body starts to get bigger and it looks like you're fatter, but it's just because your body has tons of fluids and liquids inside that you're dying. "Then think about the positive things," my mother told her. "Do that for me." The one positive thing we could dwell upon was our maize crop. Out in our field, the stalks, the flowers, the maize had grown as high as my father's chest. The first ears had begun to form, revealing traces of red silk on their heads, and the leaves and stalks were fading from deep green to yellow. So this means the maize, the corn, is almost ready. While men withered and died all around us, our plants were coming up, fat and strong. So the only thing keeping them happy is knowing that their maize is actually growing. 20 days, I predicted to my father. "I'd say you're right." If it was indeed correct, then we had 20 days until the green maize was ripe enough to eat, what we lovingly called dawe. So dawe, or doe, is what they call when the maize is ready to eat, which means they will be able to eat. It's equivalent to American corn on the cob, when the kernels are soft and sweet and pop between your teeth. All day and night I dreamed of Doway. By the beginning of March, the maize stalks had reached my father's head. At this stage, the flowers told you everything. Once the red and yellow silk skin began to dry and turn brown, you could start checking for Doway. I'd go from plant to plant, stalk to stalk, pinching the cob to feel the grain. If the kernels, the small yellow things, were crushed under my fingers, it was too early. But if they felt firm and hard, then it was time. Every morning for a week, Joffrey and I walked up and down the rows, pointing out ones that were nearly done. Remember, they're starving, so they're so excited. Then finally I spotted a cob that appeared ripe, ready to eat, and gave it a squeeze. It was firm, it was hard. "This one's ready," I said. "Yeah," said Joffrey, pointing to another. "And so is this one, and this one, and this one." Our long-awaited day had finally arrived. "Let's eat." Using the last of our energy, we ran through the rows, pulling the ripe Doway and cradling them in our arms. Soon I had 15 ears, not real ears, but that's what they call the plant, and Joffrey had the same. We peeled back the first layer of husks and tied them all together, then draped the chain across our shoulders. The sight of Joffrey and me running through the courtyard with necklaces of Doway nearly caused a riot. "It's ready?" Aisha asked, her eyes wide and excited. "Ready." "The Doway is ready!" In the kitchen, I stoked the coals of my mother's fire until they burned red. Soon my sisters were crowded inside the door, fighting for space. "Relax," I shouted. "There's plenty of Doway for everyone." I placed several corn on the cobs directly on the coals, then flipped them until the peels were crisped and blackened. I burned my fingers pulling one off, then stripped the steaming husks and began to eat. The kernels were meaty and warm and filled with the essence of God. I chewed long and slow. Each time I swallowed, I was returning something that had gone missing long ago. Remember, it's been so long since they've eaten, or eaten a lot of food. Looking up, I saw my parents in the doorway. "I don't think this Doway is ready," my father said, snatching one off the fire. He pulled off the silk and took his first bite. Within seconds, the blood of life seemed to rush back into his face. He knew he would live. "It's ready," he said and smiled. That afternoon, we must have eaten 30 ears of maize. As if heaven opened up, the first pumpkins in our field were also ready. My mother boiled them, and seeds and all, then served up baskets of the steaming meat. My God! To have a stomach filled with warm food was one of the greatest pleasures in life. Joffrey and his mother started coming over and enjoying meals of pumpkin and Doway with us. Soon the swelling in Joffrey's legs went away, and he was smiling like his old self, like he used to. For Joffrey and me, March was like one big celebration. Each morning before work, we made a fire in the field and ate a big breakfast of roasted maize and pumpkins. I remembered a parable that Jesus told to his disciples, the one about the sower of seeds, the people that plant things. The seeds planted along the road get stepped on and damaged. Those planted in rocky soil can't take root, they can't grow, but the ones planted in the thorns get tangled in the barbs. But the seeds planted on soil with fertilizer live and prosper. Mr. Joffrey, we're like those seeds planted on fertile soil, not on the roadside stepped on everyone walking past. No, not us. That's right. We lived. We survived. So at the end of the chapter, so just as it looks like William and his family are going to die very soon, the crop, everything they need to survive is coming back to life and growing. Maybe not for other people who are so lucky. but for him and his family they will eat again, and so will his cousin Joffrey. That's the end of chapter 8.